The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia picked up the phone. He did not call Washington. He did not call Beijing. He called Ottawa. And what was agreed to in that conversation is now being described inside the Federal Reserve as the most serious threat to dollar dominance in the last 50 years. If you follow global money and power, hit subscribe right now. We cover this daily and you will not want to miss what comes next. Saudi Arabia and Canada have just signed a $1 trillion energy and economic partnership. But buried inside that agreement is a single clause that sent currency markets into immediate motion the moment it became public. That clause states that all energy transactions between the two countries will be settled in a basket of currencies: the euro, the Chinese yuan, the British pound, and a new jointly managed digital token. The United States dollar is not in that basket. That exclusion was not an oversight. It was a deliberate architectural decision, and the markets understood exactly what it meant within hours. Here is what you need to sit with for a moment. Since 1974, every significant barrel of oil traded on the global market has been priced in US dollars. That single fact has shaped everything. Why American consumers get cheap imported goods. Why the US government borrows at low rates despite its debt. Why American sanctions carry global reach. The entire chain begins with one condition: oil is priced in dollars. This agreement challenges that condition directly for the first time in half a century. Stay with us because the mechanics of what happens next affect your mortgage, your savings, and your cost of living in ways most financial media has not yet connected. The dollar fell 2.3% in a single trading session after the announcement. Gold rose. The euro and the yuan both strengthened. Treasury yields moved higher, signaling reduced foreign appetite for American government debt. These were not panic moves. They were markets calmly repricing a structural reality that had just changed. Within 72 hours, the Federal Reserve Chair privately briefed the Senate Banking Committee. That briefing leaked. It included a scenario analysis tracing this clause from global oil markets all the way through to the monthly budgets of American families. The Fed chair described the currency clause as the most consequential threat to dollar dominance he had seen in his career. 12 senators from both parties immediately requested an emergency joint hearing. Bipartisan alarm in Washington is rare. When it happens, it is worth paying attention. Now consider who engineered this. Mohammed bin Salman controls the world's largest proven oil reserves. His family's 1974 decision with the Nixon administration is what created the petrodollar system in the first place. That agreement was never a formal treaty. Congress never voted on it. It was a private understanding between two governments that quietly restructured global finance for 50 years. MBS knows exactly what he built because his family built it. He also knows exactly what dismantling it would mean. Mark Carney is the Prime Minister of Canada, but his biography in this context is extraordinary and almost too perfectly matched to this moment. He served as governor of the Bank of Canada. Then he served as governor of the Bank of England. He is the only sitting head of government on the planet who has run two G7 central banks. He understands reserve currency architecture at the engineering level, how clearing systems are built, how exchange rate frameworks are maintained, and crucially, how alternatives to dominant currency systems are structured and legitimized. Saudi Arabia had the oil and the motive. What it needed was someone who could actually design and build the alternative settlement infrastructure with technical credibility. Carney was that person. The phone call was the commission. Now here is what they actually agreed to. The partnership is structured across 5 interconnected areas. $400 billion combines Canadian oil and gas production with Saudi refining and distribution capacity, creating a coordinated supply chain between two of the world's most significant energy producers. 200 billion pairs Canadian mineral reserves with Saudi petrochemical processing, strengthening critical material supply chains that the global economy increasingly depends on. Another 200 billion creates a joint investment fund managed by Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund alongside Canadian pension funds, with assets held in non-dollar currencies. 100 billion connects Canadian artificial intelligence and clean energy expertise with Saudi capital and market access. Each of those 4 components would be a landmark agreement on its own. but they were all built to support the fifth element. $100 billion to construct the infrastructure for a settlement system that prices all energy transactions between the two countries outside the dollar. Oil, natural gas, and refined products priced in euros, yuan, pounds, and a new digital token jointly managed by the Bank of Canada and the Saudi Arabian Monetary Authority. The clause covers 3 to 4 million barrels per day. That is approximately 4% of global oil trade. 4% is not enough to collapse the dollar system. That is not the point. The point is what 4% represents. It represents the first working model, the first proven template, the first time since 1974 that a major oil producer has officially priced a significant volume of oil outside the dollar, and done so with the explicit endorsement of the nation that created the petrodollar in the first place. The Federal Reserve's internal analysis follows a chain of logic that every American household should understand. Less oil traded in dollars means lower global demand for dollars overall. Lower demand for dollars means fewer countries buying U.S. Treasury bonds. Fewer Treasury purchases mean the government must offer higher interest rates to attract buyers. Higher Treasury rates become higher rates on mortgages, car loans, and business credit, because Treasury rates are the baseline from which every American borrowing cost is calculated. The Fed estimated that if the Saudi-Canadian framework spreads to just 3 additional oil producers, generating a 5% reduction in global dollar demand, the average American mortgage rate could rise by between 0.75 and 1.5 percentage points. On a $400,000 home loan, that translates to between $180 and $360 additional dollars every single month. That is not a foreign policy abstraction. That is your monthly budget. Warren Buffett addressed the reserve currency question directly. He described the dollar's reserve status as the most valuable asset the United States has ever held. More valuable than the military. More valuable than the technology sector. More valuable than all American real estate combined. He then drew the comparison that should make every observer uneasy. The British pound was the world's dominant reserve currency for roughly 150 years. It did not lose that status in a crash. It lost it through slow, steady erosion. A trade settlement in francs here. A colonial nation diversifying into dollar reserves there. An oil transaction priced in a mixed basket somewhere else. Each individual shift appeared small. Each was explained away by analysts who believed pound dominance was structurally permanent. Then, in the late 1940s, the accumulated weight of those small shifts reached a tipping point, and the transition moved faster than anyone had modeled. Buffett's assessment is that the dollar is following the same pattern. The Saudi-Canadian clause does not end dollar dominance, but it establishes the precedent, provides the working template, and removes the psychological barrier that had kept other producers from moving. Within 1 week of the announcement, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Nigeria had each initiated formal consultations with the Saudi-Canadian framework. These are not countries acting on ideology. These are countries that watched the United States apply sustained economic pressure to Canada, one of its oldest and closest allies, for months, and drew a rational conclusion. A financial system that can be weaponized against a friend today can be weaponized against anyone tomorrow. Sovereign financial diversification stopped looking like political defiance and started looking like prudent risk management. Trump called the Saudi crown prince directly 72 hours after the announcement. He asked him to reconsider the currency clause. The crown prince declined. He said the decision reflected Saudi Arabia's sovereign interest in financial diversification and was not open to revision. The call lasted 11 minutes. American officials called it frank. Saudi officials called it clear. In diplomatic language, both descriptions mean the same thing. The answer was no. The petrodollar system was built on a private agreement between two governments in 1974. It is now being restructured because the trust and the conditions that sustained that agreement have fundamentally shifted. Whether the dollar can defend its reserve currency status, whether American households absorb the cost of reduced global dollar demand, and whether Washington can rebuild the credibility required to anchor the system it created, these are the defining financial questions of the decade ahead. What happens next? Does the dollar hold? Or is this the beginning of a 50-year transition finally reaching its tipping point? Drop your view in the comments. Every perspective sharpens the picture, and we read every one. We break down developments like this every single day, the stories moving money and power before the mainstream catches up. If that is what you are here for, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update.